The majority of the approximately 5,700 Greek manuscripts date from after 1000 AD, which comprises the majority text. Here we have the Fraktur M again, which means the majority text. The earlier texts are called papyri texts, written in uncial or majuscule text. Uncial text is all capital forms, no spacing, and no punctuation. As we can see, throughout the centuries, there is a gradual transition from papyri in the 2nd century to uncials in the 4th century, and then from the 9th century on, minuscules dominated the manuscript tradition. Again, we see from the 2nd century to the 9th century, there is a transition from the Alexandrian text to the Byzantine text. So what are the Alexandrian manuscripts? The Alexandrian text, also called the neutral text by Westcott and Hort, is often considered the text that preserves the original reading the best. The two best attestations to the Alexandrian text are Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. More recently, P66 and P75, P stands for papyrus, both from the 2nd and 3rd century, give evidence that the Alexandrian text type goes back even farther than Sinaiticus or Vaticanus. What is the Western text type? This text was used most widely in the area of Italy, Gaul, and North Africa and can be traced back to the 2nd century. It was used by Marcion, Tatian, Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Cyprian. The most important texts for the Western text are Codex Beza, Codex Claromontanus, and Codex Washingtonianus. The Western text is most known for its frequency of paraphrasing, changing, omitting, and inserting words, clauses, and entire sentences. The motives for this were probably harmonization or trying to enrich the narrative by adding traditional or apocryphal material. The Book of Acts is one of the best examples of the differences between the Western text and the Alexandrian text. In the Western text, Acts is almost 10% longer than in the original reading. What is the Caesarean text? This text is preserved in several Greek manuscripts like Theta 565 and 700, as well as the Armenian and the Gregorian versions. It's basically a mixture of Western and Alexandrian texts. So what are the Byzantine manuscripts? This is also called the Syrian text, the Koine text, the ecclesiastical text, and the Antiochian text. This is the text that is the latest of all of the text types. It was most probably produced in Antioch in Syria. Until the invention of the printing press, this text was widely considered the authoritative text and was most widely accepted. The framers of the text wanted to smooth out the hardness of the language, combine two or more divergent readings into one expanded reading, this is called conflation, and to harmonize divergent parallel passages. This text was taken to Constantinople and distributed throughout the whole of the Byzantine Empire. It is best attested by Codex Alexandrinus, the later uncial manuscripts, and most of the minuscule manuscripts. Now let's take a look at some of the manuscripts that we have found. Here is P52, also called Ryland's 457, which was written around AD 125. The manuscript is the earliest discovered New Testament manuscript. It is about the size of a credit card. He probably loved the Gospels and wanted other people to have it too. The front of the manuscript is John 18, 31 through 33, and the back is John 18, 37 through 38. Now here are the front and the back images of P52. Here is what P52 would look like with the Greek verses filled in. Here is another manuscript, P115. It is from AD 250 to 275 and is from the book of Revelation, chapter 13. Here's part of the text zoomed in so you can see. We have 2 papyri manuscripts from this particular part of the book of Revelation. If I were to ask you all what the number of the beast is, what would you say? Probably 666? Actually, these 2 papyri don't say 666. They actually say 616. The reason we know this is because the chi, the x, is 600, the iota is 10, and the sigma, the c, is 6. 616. Here's P72. It's from AD 175 to 200 and contains 2 Peter 1:1. And here's part of it zoomed in so we can see. P75 is from AD 175 to 200. This is a papyri that has the end of Luke, beginning of John written on it. P66 from AD 175 to 200 shows the end of John 1:1. Now here we have it zoomed in where we can see the word logos, which is an affirmation of the deity of Christ. P46 from AD 175 to 200 is the earliest collection of Paul's writings. Now, who wrote the book of Hebrews? No one knows exactly who wrote it. Paul, Luke, Apollos, Clement of Rome, Barnabas, Silvanus, Philip, and Priscilla are all contenders to having written it. The writer of this obviously thought Paul wrote it because the book of Hebrews is in this manuscript. Now, just an interesting part. The part zoomed in that we have here says, to the Philippians. So it's the start of the book of Philippians. P91 from AD 250 is the book of Acts, housed in Sydney, Australia. And this is only one of 3 pieces of the manuscript. It was ripped into 3. Now, let's go into different codices. After the Peace of the Church in AD 313, and the Peace of the Church was when Emperor Constantine allowed Christianity and they weren't persecuted anymore, Christians could have professional scribes copy the scriptures. At this time, the great vellum, meaning leather, manuscripts began to appear, including the 3 greatest of these: Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and Alexandrinus. Sinaiticus is abbreviated by an aleph, Vaticanus a B, and Alexandrinus an A. Now let's talk a little bit about Codex Sinaiticus. It's kept in the British Library, and it's from AD 325. And I've actually seen this manuscript in the British Library. Now, Codex Sinaiticus was written in the middle of the 4th century. The text is completely handwritten in Koine Greek. It has both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Codex Sinaiticus literally means the Sinai book. Codex means book. The pages were made of parchment, and parchment is made of animal skins, primarily sheep, calves, and goats. During its history, parts of the Codex were also known by other names. The 43 leaves, which are now at the Leipzig University Library, were published in 1846 as Codex Frederico Augustinus, in honor of Frederick Augustus II, King of Saxony, who was the patron of the German biblical scholar and editor of Codex Sinaiticus, Constantine Tischendorf. The 347 leaves, now in the British Library, were previously known as Codex Sinaiticus Petropolitanus, as they were kept in St. Petersburg between 1863 and 1933. Codex Sinaiticus was copied by more than one scribe. Constantine Tischendorf, a leading biblical scholar of his time, identified 4 in the 9th century. Later research decided there were 3, but it is still possible that a 4th can be identified different from Constantine's 4th scribe. Each of the 3 undisputed scribes had a distinctive way of writing which can be identified. Each also had a distinctive way of spelling many sounds, particularly vowels which scribes often wrote phonetically. To make the manuscripts, the scribes had to perform a series of tasks. Determine a font. There are very few surviving manuscripts written with 4 columns to a page. They had to divide the work between them, prepare the parchment, including ruling it with a framework for the layout of columns and lines, prepare the manuscripts they were copying, get pens and ink together, write the text, check the text, assemble the whole codex in the right order. The codex has books not found in the Hebrew Bible. 2nd Esdras, Tobit, Judith, 1st and 4th Maccabees, Wisdom, and Sirach. And appended to the New Testament are the epistles of Barnabas and the Shepherd of Hermas, regarded in the Protestant tradition as apocryphal. The sequence of books is also very different from how it is today. Within the New Testament, the letter to the Hebrews is placed after Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians, and the Acts of the Apostles between the pastoral and Catholic epistles. This sheds major light into how the early Christian Bible was constructed. Here again is a picture of Codex Sinaiticus. The bottom right page is the codex zoomed in. Now, as we can see, there are 4 columns and it is all handwritten. And if you want to find out more or see the codex, you can go to a couple different websites. The Center for the Conservation of New Testament Manuscripts has Codex Sinaiticus, but also codexsinaiticus.org is the main one who has the manuscript and is working on digitizing it. So here's a part of the codex shown in 2 different lights: standard light on the left and raking light on the right. Raking light is used to see the condition of the page, how old it is, what the transcribers may have seen while transcribing it, etc. Now let's talk a little bit about Codex Vaticanus. Codex Vaticanus was written in AD 325 and it is housed inside the Vatican. It is nearly the oldest Greek Bible in existence. It doesn't have most of the book of Genesis, Hebrews 9:14 to the end, the pastoral epistles, or the book of Revelation. It was written in unsealed text and usually taken as the best representative of the ancient Alexandrian form of the New Testament text. Codex Alexandrinus, which was written in AD 400, is also kept in the British Library, and I've also seen this codex as well. Codex Alexandrinus contains the Septuagint and the New Testament. Also contains part of the epistles of Clement. The beginning lines of each book are written in red ink, and sections within the book are marked by a larger letter into the margin. It was written in unsealed text. Now here is a picture of the codex zoomed in. It contains 773 pages, 630 for the Old Testament and 143 for the New Testament. This is the end of the Gospel of St. Luke, or Luke to most Protestant groups. It is marked by a tailpiece, a distinctive ornamental panel with stylized decoration. Similar tailpieces accompany the titles of each of the books of the Bible. Now we'll move on to Codex Beza, abbreviated as D, written in the 5th century, and contains the Gospels and Acts of the Apostles. Here's a picture of it. Codex Claromontanus, abbreviated as D, here is a picture of it, and it is written in the 6th century, and it contains the Pauline epistles. Codex Washingtonianus, abbreviated as W, was written in the 5th century, and it contains Mark 1:1 through 5:30. Now let's talk about some of the manuscripts. Aside from the 5,700 Greek texts, we have early translations into Latin, Coptic, Sahidic, etc., that are important witnesses to the early texts of the New Testament. Combining these with the Greek texts yields over 20,000 handwritten witnesses. We have more than 124 Greek manuscript witnesses within the first 300 years after the writing of the New Testament. That is far more than any other work of antiquity. We have 12 manuscripts from the 2nd century, i.e. within 100 years of the writing of the New Testament. These manuscripts contain portions of all 4 Gospels, 9 books of Paul, Acts, Hebrews, and Revelation, comprising a majority of the books in the New Testament we possess today. And again, no work of antiquity even comes close to the early attestation. Now, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the average length of time between the writing of the works of antiquity and the discovery of the oldest surviving manuscript is astounding, such as the historical works of Pliny, who wrote the letters to various figures like the imperial magistrate, and Tacitus, Suetonius, who wrote biographies of 12 Roman rulers, including Julius Caesar, or Tacitus, who wrote the annals and histories, and their first extant or surviving copies is between 500 and 900 years, and some even go farther back than 900 years.